You're watching The Attorneys, a paid advertisement brought to you by the law firm of Hollis, Wright.
Car crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, The Attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with The Attorneys of Hollis Wright.
Hello and welcome to The Attorneys. I'm Art Franklin. On this show, we're discussing when an agreement must be in writing to be valid and enforceable. We're going to talk about that and much more. But first, we want to remind you that right now, lawyers at Hollis Wright are standing by to take your call. They'll be on the phones throughout the show. All you have to do is call 1-844-LAW-TALK. That's 1-844-LAW-TALK. It's a free confidential call. We're glad you're joining us as we get into this discussion my TV partner, Josh Wright.
I like that. I'll be your TV partner. I'd be your TV partner any day. All right. Have you ever wondered why when you have someone that cleans your house, does your landscape, you don't have a contract signed, yet you probably do have a contract signed when you go buy a piece of property or when you end up drafting a will? Well, we're going to talk about that today, and we're going to unwrap it because that actually is a really important issue, and people need to understand why it's important to have a contract and when it is required to have a contract. So first of all, Ed Merrell, good friend of ours at the law firm.
Thank you.
Been on the show before, is on with the Merrell Law Firm. And first, thank you for being on.
You're welcome.
We're excited to have you here.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Talk just a little bit about your firm first, and then let's kind of work our way into this issue of unwrapping why we have contracts and when a contract is required.
Sure. So the Merrell Law Firm's been around 12 years now. I've been practicing 12 years. We do a lot of contract work. About 60% of our business is going to be some sort of contracts related to constructions and purchasing cars and things of that nature. We also see a lot of domestic and some criminal cases. We represent quite a few different businesses. We've got 4 or 5 attorneys that work in the firm at any given time. And so we try to take a kind of a team approach to everything we do.
Yeah.
I think that's what separates us from some of the other smaller firms is that we don't really do anything with just one attorney.
Yeah.
We try to make sure that the multiple attorneys are participating.
Well, and the collaborative effort also helps.
It does.
Gives better quality of service to the client generally.
Yeah.
So I told Ed before the show we were going to make contracts cool today because contracts are cool. And I remember that my law school professor in law school on contracts used to say, contracts are cool, let me tell you why. Yeah. And so let's talk just a little bit about this issue because we see so many circumstances where we just operate on a month-to-month basis or we just pay a service provider that came over to our house or that we do business with, and yet sometimes contracts have to be in writing. Let's unwrap that a little bit and maybe kind of explain it to the folks watching.
Sure. So generally speaking in Alabama, a written contract is not required. But there are some areas where you do have to have a contract. And one of the things in law that comes up that requires a contract is a thing called the Statute of Frauds. Statute of Frauds is not a fraudulent act. It really has to do with the contract themselves and whether or not those contracts must be in writing to be enforceable. There's an acronym that lawyers use to try and remember what those are, and that's that if the contract is something that has to be in writing, it has to be something that falls between my legs. Okay? And so what my legs stands for is M is for marriage, Y is for something that's beyond 1 year, L is the sale of land, E is something that has to do with estates. You're talking about wills, something along those lines. G is going to be goods that are over $500. So, for example, if you're buying a $20 turkey at Walmart, you don't have to have a contract for it. And then the last one is sureties. And sureties is something that we don't deal with as frequently. You'll see that where maybe you owe money to somebody and then you want me to take on that debt for you. In order to do that, you'd have to have a writing.
My legs. That makes it simple. That makes it super simple. All stuff that we learned years ago. Talk just a little bit about that kind of that acronym, like what is the negative side? Let's assume you buy a piece of property from somebody and it's a handshake. People say this is a handshake agreement. My word is my bond.
Sure.
And all of a sudden, then someone passes away and that wasn't enforceable, and that doesn't even roll into the estate. Like, why is it so important that we have this stuff signed and in writing under certain circumstances?
So one of the more frequent ones that does come up is those sale of land. And what I see quite frequently in my practice is somebody who has gone into a verbal agreement to lease to own. I'm going to pay you rent for the next 5 years, and at the end of it, I'm going to get the property. Well, it's really important that if you're going to enter into a contract like that you do so in writing, because if somebody passes away or just changes their mind, if you want to sue them for the rights to that property, if it's not in writing, it's not enforceable.
This is super important stuff too, because a lot of times I think what we see in the South especially is people trying to negotiate certain things, sign off on certain things without actually a signed contract that can impact whether or not it's actually enforceable moving forward.
Yeah, as the non-attorney sitting here, I'm like everyone at home, and I'm thinking about these contracts or not having a contract and how much protection I have if I don't have a contract when I'm dealing with someone else.
Well, and if you're dealing with a contract that falls in the statute of frauds, you have no protections. And this is probably something for another show, but AI is one of those things now where people are really getting into trying to draft their own contracts. And when you're dealing with a statute of frauds, it's more than just, do I have a piece of paper? Do I have a piece of paper that has the elements necessary? And of course, that's why you'd want to see a lawyer. Yeah.
Let's talk for a minute about marriage. Marriage contracts are important. We see people go to the courthouse and they have a marriage certificate, and for marriage purposes, there are certain things they do in advance of a marriage potentially to protect assets. And then if there's a divorce, a lot of that is through a court, but also in writing. Talk about the importance of that in a marriage contract.
So keep in mind, a marriage is in fact a contract.
Yeah.
We talk about the engagement ring. When does that become possession of the person who received it? Well, that doesn't become their property until the vows take place. Well, the same is true if you have assets that you're trying to protect during that marriage. If you go into a marriage and you don't have a prenup, for example, it's just promises.
Yeah.
And it's a promise like any other promise. That you hope that the individual will keep it, but when you get to court and there becomes a divorce, those promises are simply not enforceable.
Well, and not just that, like if you've got a mediated agreement in a divorce, what people's obligations are going to be and what their responsibilities are going to be with reference to children that's signed off by a court, that contract needs to be in writing.
Correct. Yeah, that's another spot, especially when you're talking about the mediation. A verbal agreement during mediation, if it's not signed when you walk out of that room, it's not enforceable.
What do you see most often? What's the most significant issue you see from a contract perspective where people make mistakes? Is it in land sale? Is it in marriage? Where do you see this come up most often?
So I think the two common ones are going to be in construction cases. And that's a new area that we'll talk about later. But the next one's going to be marriage. There's a lot of conversation during marriage, especially with the assets and with the debt. I agree to pay your Discover card for you, and maybe for the next 10 years I pay your Discover card, but then we get divorced. It was just an agreement to do so. It's not an enforceable agreement.
I know we're getting ready to go to break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about agreements that are longer than a year and the importance of wills and estate paperwork that have to be in writing if you want it to be enforceable. Ed will be able to unpack that for us on the other side.
All right, a lot more to talk about as we head to break. I want to remind you to follow us, Hollis Wright, on all social media platforms, on X, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. You'll get some great information throughout the week, so you stay connected to us throughout the week on those social media platforms. Also, on the bottom of your screen, you see a QR code there. Go ahead, scan it. It's quick, it's easy, and you can get in contact with someone at Hollis Wright right now while we're on this program. We'll take a break. The attorneys will return right after this.
Here's some good information from our firm to you. Hollis Wright recently launched the Law Talk podcast. With podcasts becoming so popular, this will be a simple way to provide our loyal viewers with more opportunities to access information about important legal topics and to learn more about our firm and how we can help you if the need ever arises. There are many ways to access the Law Talk podcast. You can simply scan the QR code on your screen. Also, episodes are always available on the Hollis Wright YouTube channel, as well as on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you consume your podcasts. Just search up Hollis Wright in the Law Talk podcast. Don't wait, take advantage and listen today. Thanks for watching The Attorneys, and we know you'll enjoy the Law Talk podcast.
The Attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show in 2011, my goal was to do what our firm does best. Help people answer questions related to real-world legal issues they have in their lives in a way that's not intimidating to talk with a lawyer. If the issue is important to you, it's equally important to us, and we're ready to talk with you at no cost.
Yeah, oftentimes people are confronting various legal issues in their lives that really run the gamut of a lot of different legal practice areas, such as bankruptcy, criminal law, civil law, such as personal injury, divorces, domestic relations. And to be able to have a show once a week that covers those practice areas and answers people's questions in those areas, that's really the main objective of the show.
We use the resources of the many lawyers at our law firm to create a plan that has a lasting impact for each person that calls or texts. And we also give back to the community at the same time. We are here to serve you, the viewer, each week on The Attorneys.
Addiction kills hope.
But at Bradford, it all changes here.
Experience the difference
that proven treatment can make.
Find recovery, find community.
at Bradford.
You're watching The Attorneys, a paid advertisement brought to you by the law firm of Hollis Wright.
Welcome back. You are watching The Attorneys, and we're talking about the statute of frauds and when agreements must be in writing. As we continue to unpack that, we're coming back. Ed, this is really fascinating stuff. For me, I'm sitting here thinking about all the other agreements I have that may not have a contract to sign. You take an invoice, but you don't have a contract with it, so that makes a difference.
It does, especially in the construction realm. 10 years ago, an invoice by itself would have been probably acceptable, maybe even a work order. But the Alabama Home Builders Association has recently changed that to where a licensed home builder who's a general contractor doing work over $50,000 not only has to have a written contract, but there's a bunch of things that are required on that contract. For example, their license number. And that's come up in some recent cases we've had, and I think it's something that's you're going to start seeing problems with that with a lot of these contracts now.
So I want to also discuss this issue. Just because there's not a written contract, does that mean that if someone provides service to you, that service is not enforceable to be paid on? Does that make sense?
It does, and of course the answer is it depends on what the service is. But there is an area of law that requires you to pay for somebody's services. Mm-hmm. But what those services are, what they did, whether or not the courts can enforce it as a whole is a whole different conversation.
Talk to me a little bit about estate-related contracts, because we do a lot of shows, and Art has been through a ton of those with me, related to drafting wills and the importance of having it in writing and signed by witnesses and filed and probated correctly when someone passes away. Like, you can make gigantic mistakes with your intent to try and distribute things to your heirs outside of your estate and not have it clawed back into your estate and be taxed potentially if you don't put it in writing. Fair?
Fair.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people, we go back to the handshake idea. You know, this is my son. I want to leave him my hunting rifles, but you don't put that in the will. And so if it's not in the will, then the property is going to be distributed in whatever fashion the will has. Yeah. And if there's not a will, things just get divided by the court.
Yeah.
So it's really, really important to not just have these promises, not just send emails or texts out that, hey, I would like these things to happen, but sit down with a lawyer, sit down with somebody who can plan your estate for you, and look at what kind of assets do I have? What kind of value does it have with it? What kind of tax issues are we going to have to deal with, upon my passing? And make sure all that stuff is in some sort of a writing through a will or through advance directives and things of that nature.
And I was actually going to mention that exact point. Think about this: medical directives of what you desire or what your parents desire, what my parents desire as they get into an older age. And if that stuff is not in writing, just a word of, hey, this is what I would like to happen with me, a hospital is not going to take that. A medical facility, a nursing home is not going to take that unless they've got a written contract or an agreement with a medical directive. So that's another example of where contracts really are cool generally to talk about because they're important to use to make sure you do the right thing. And look, here's the best point of this whole show. If you're unclear and you wonder, hey, do I need to have something signed? Does the statute of frauds applies? This is why we get you to Ed, because Ed can unwrap that whole concept for you and explain to you what you need to do and then help you get it done.
Yeah, and contracts are cool.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about the term of agreements too. We talked about over a year, or also the amount of money. Does that factor in as well if it's over $500?
Well, the amount of money is only going to apply if it's a sale of goods.
Okay.
So, for example, if you're selling a car, you would need, the car is going to be over $500 in most cases, so you would need a written contract to buy and sell that car. But the price of a piece of land, for example, doesn't matter. What does matter is the fact that it is the sale of land. Even if you're only selling it for $500 or $400, you still have to have a writing for the sale of land.
I know you see this because I'm in the middle of this right now. I represent a client where there is a question about what is going to happen to a piece of property. And there was a contract for the sale initially, and then there was a verbal for almost 2 generations of what was supposed to happen with this property, but it was never reduced to contract. And now the family's saying, look, everyone knew this. I can present witnesses that will confirm in our family this was the intent at his passing. But the reality is the other side of the family, there's a bit of a dispute. And now they're looking at it and say, well, hold on now, there's only one contract over here. There's one contract for the sale of that property. There's one deed, and there's no indication what should happen other than it flows directly through the estate the way that it's supposed to. And so this has created a major issue. I know you see this stuff all the time.
I do, and of course with contracts we talk about the 4 corners rule, the 4 corners of the document. If it's not written in that document, then in most cases it doesn't apply. There is some other things like the parole evidence rule where we're talking about things that are where conversations are written, maybe some emails or whatnot that are outside the document, but those are really only going to come into play if there's a term within the document that isn't precise. For example, you may be selling that land, but you didn't put a price in there. I'm going to sell my property at 123 Main Street, but I don't say how much it's going to be. If you had a text message or an email, that might give you that price. But for the most part, if it's not in the contract, it's probably not going to be enforceable.
And are there a lot, go ahead if you had a question, but I was just going to say there are a lot of circumstances where someone does a rent to own, where they have an agreement on the side, hey, look, I'm going to rent this piece of property and this person has agreed to allow me to buy it after I pay a certain amount of payments. And ultimately, they make those payments and then either that person passes away or the property gets sold and there was no contract, and that's not enforceable. It's an important reason why you get Ed involved early to be able to make sure that you got a contract in place.
And what I would ask, Ed, if the requirements are not in writing, what kind of legal remedies would I have if they're not meeting those requirements?
It really depends on the contract or the type of situation, but using the 1 year, for example, you're leasing that property and you're leasing it for 5 years, but you don't have it in writing, then it's going to default back to the state rules, which is year in, or then eventually month to month. And so, you may have a property that you thought you were going to be in for 5 years, and at the end of this year, they send you a notice to vacate.
Call Ed.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That actually could be a good little advertising. Call Ed. Just call Ed.
Yeah.
Hey, when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about the sale of goods and the difference between a Walmart sale and a company that sells goods over $500 in bulk. And I also want to talk a little bit about securities and stocks and bonds and why it's important to make sure those things are locked down in a contract.
A lot more still to discuss, and you still have time. While this show is on, you can reach an attorney at Hollis Wright. Call 1-844-LAW-TALK. 1-844-LAW-TALK for a free confidential call. Get your questions answered right now. We'll take a break. The attorneys return right after this.
Thank you for watching The Attorneys each Sunday night, where we come to your living room to provide free legal advice in a confidential, off-air setting. Unfortunately, with the number of calls, texts, and emails that come in during the show, we can't always get to everything. But know this, Hollis Wright is open all week long. You call us at 844-LAW-TALK and we're going to answer your question for free. Thank you for watching The Attorneys, and we look forward to seeing you and talking to you soon.
If this place could talk, it wouldn't. It would sing and celebrate all of our stories of addiction recovery, victory, and community. This is Bradford Health Services. It all changes here.
You're watching The Attorneys, a paid advertisement brought to you by the law firm of Hollis Wright.
Welcome back. You are watching The Attorneys, and we're talking about the statute of frauds. That sounds like a scary movie.
It does sound
And
ominous.
it can be pretty scary if you don't have that contract. in
Very
place, right?
ominous. I like that. It is. And if you don't have the contract, you could be in trouble. All right. Talk a little bit about, let's say you're a business that is buying things in bulk, the importance of having a contract for those things. Whereas when I go to Walmart or I go somewhere else to go get food at a grocery store, I don't have to have a contract to make sure the pricing is locked down.
So the Walmart one makes it simple.
Yeah.
At the end of the purchase, they give you a receipt. So that is, in essence, your contract.
Yeah.
But your contractor or your company who is buying large quantities of goods, it is super important to have that in writing for various reasons. One, what happens when the transportation of that goods from one location to another occurs and it's damaged, it's stolen. You saw here recently the high-end car ship that tipped over in the ocean and dumped thousands of cars into the ocean.
Yep.
You know, who's responsible for that? Who's paying for that? Whose insurance company is going to pay for it? If you ask for a certain type of goods, are you getting those widgets?
Yeah.
Are you getting those widgets the way you designed them to? Are they going to function the way you want them to? If they don't, is there some sort of clause in the contract that allows you to recover your money?
So you raised an important point. I once represented a gentleman who was purchasing a car through a social media platform and then was guided without really realizing what was happening, guided outside the social media platform to a non-social media platform purchasing area. Then he, without a contract, funded a certain amount for a car. And then when it came time to get the car, he didn't get the car and the money was gone. And then the question was, is there a contract? Can it be enforced? How do we track this money, et cetera? Contracts play into things like that too.
They do, and that's a very common example. I've handled several cases here recently with that.
And so what you want to make sure you do, by the way, just for what it's worth, is to make sure you stay inside that platform, because the platform has pre-assigned contractual rights that you're entitled to and that you can recover. And if there's fraud, they have certain obligations to pay you back. And you wonder sometimes, like, someone stole my credit card and the bank is still reimbursing me. Why is the bank reimbursing me? All based on contract.
All on contract.
But so often you go outside of that platform.
You do.
So you're purchasing something that, even if it goes out of that platform to PayPal, so it switches back and forth. So when
You want
What
to
do you
try
know when you're
you want to
safe?
try and stay inside the platform to do the purchase. That specific platform had a purchasing component that could have been used. The money gets funded to the platform, and then the
Right.
platform pays it down after the person confirms receipt of the vehicle. And what they did is they trusted the person they were communicating with, and it turned out that that individual was a college student in another state that was a holding agent for money that was holding the money and then having it distributed out of their account, and they were keeping 10% in their account. It's a long story, but I just tell you, had they had a contract, it would have been a lot easier to collect that money back.
So we said call Ed before.
Yeah,
call Josh now.
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
Well, one thing that's really important, we keep talking about having a contract. You need to have a copy of your contract.
Yeah.
So many people come to me and they say, we had a contract to do this, and they say, well, it's in writing. I'm excited at this point because you've got the elements we need. I ask, can you see it? And they don't have a copy of it. It's lost somehow, or they didn't get a copy, or they didn't make a copy offline.
Let me ask you this, and we see this more and more. My wife told me the other day, you can't sign that online. They want an actual wet signature. You're doing it digitally. They're not going to take that. And things have changed. Technology has changed the way that we look at contracts now. Our online contracts where you're signing with DocuSign at the recommendation of the person that's sending you the contract, or you're putting a digital signature on as opposed to a regular signature, are those still enforceable contracts for the most part? For the most part, there are a few exceptions, but for the most part, as long as you have the written contract with a signature that can be identified to you personally, which a DocuSign does, I think those are going to be enforceable. There was a time, Ed, back in the day, I know you know, that you could not sign a land sale in a blue pen. They had to have black, and you had to sign exactly what your name was on your birth certificate. And I would say, hold on, that's not the way I sign my signature. This is my signature, it's different. And you'd have a battle over that. And so all of this is about enforcing and making sure that the contracts that you do sign are enforceable down the road. And that's a whole other component of this, that if you've got a contract in place and you need to enforce it, you're a good person to come talk to be able to make sure that happens. That's right. That's right.
You know, when I look at these contracts and you have, and it's 20, 30, 40 pages long, is there an area that you have to pay attention to whenever you get a contract? Because sometimes these contracts are so long.
I think the longer the contract, the more likely you need an attorney. Because as the contract gets longer, there's going to be a lot of clauses that are being added to that contract. And the first question is, why? What do you need those extra terms for? If those extra terms are there, it's protecting the person who wrote that contract. And that's probably why you need to have an attorney.
Talk for a second about presumptions, because there are certain types of presumptions that play into things. For example, if someone sends you a contract and they drafted it and you have no drafting ability in it and you had no ability to change the provisions, but you signed the contract, that is enforced in different ways. Is that fair?
It is, and those are typically called boilerplate type contracts. You see those with your credit cards, with your cell phones, your insurance. You're not really negotiating anything. It's one of these where I want the cell phone, I need the credit card, and so they're going to send me a big, long contract. At the end, you just either have to accept their terms and sign them. But the contract is always presumed against the drafter. So if Discover Card had drafted a particular contract and they're signing it with you, if there's errors or ambiguities within that contract, it's against them, not against you.
Ed Merrell, great job. Glad you came on to talk about this stuff. If you have contract issues or you need them enforced, Ed's the guy you go to. If you don't remember, come to us and we'll get you to Ed one way or the other. Glad he was on.
Thank you, Ed. And on behalf of Josh Wright and everyone at Hollis Wright, thank you for watching The Attorneys. Make sure you tune in next week for another edition.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.